Also spoopy! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another spoopy video with the Renegades. The closer and closer we get to All Hallows Eve, or Devil's Night, or whatever you call it in your neck of the woods, the more spoopy it is going to get. Do you remember, you know Mr. Nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Nightmare.
Subscribe to Mr. Nightmare.
Yeah, Mr. Nightmare. Very, very popular YouTuber who is very famous for doing scary things, especially during, and he is especially prominent around the Halloween times and all that, and a lot of people flock to his videos because people are wanting to be scared for some reason. There was actually a psychological study done. Why do human beings like to be scared? And the conclusive evidence was that it is actually it's actually a little bit of an adrenaline rush. We delight in being scared because the adrenaline often gives us sort of a high.
I think it's really strange for me because it's like I have anxiety, so my adrenaline just runs all day on random days just because it fucking feels like it. And yet I still, for some reason, enjoy scary things.
Well, that's
I don't know
fun.
why. But it's weird.
Yeah.
But like this, actually, I'm excited about. Like basically, me and my bros used to when I used to partoke of less legal things in the area and stuff, which I don't really do much anymore. But
yeah,
I think we would just sit in a room and kind of like partoke of things and then watch or listen to these.
yeah.
And this was one that I remember was one of my favorite ones that we listened to, and we were cracking up about because our buddy actually does deliver pizzas for a living. We were like, what if this shit happened to you? And he's like, I'm going to be paranoid for like the next month after hearing this video.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see this animated.
My friend Adam used to deliver pizzas. He actually keeps going back there every now and again because he just likes doing it for the hell of it.
My buddy hasn't left just because he's calculated up, and like considering the tips he makes, it's hard to make a better wage at a regular job.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, because you don't have to report tips on your earnings.
Well, you're supposed to, but
You don't. But here's the thing: legally,
not everybody does.
You are not legally required to, under law. You are not legally
really?
required to. That's one thing that people always forget to take into account. You do not have to include your tips federally.
Well,
the only
they
reason
put
that
like sections and shit for it on the tax returns.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, you do not have to because it is not a legal precedence for you to do it. It is. You see, here's the thing: about the whole tax book, the whole book on taxes. I want a simplified version. Like, majority of the crap in there you can just throw away because it's all redundant. Mm-hmm. It's write-offs of write-offs of write-offs of laws that have been extinct for years and years. I mean, it makes no sense in the modern-day lexicon. I mean, hell, give me a nice flat tax rate that everyone has to aspire to, or hell, eliminate the income tax altogether and instead just tax goods that are sold at stores and all that.
Ain't happening.
Huh?
Said, yeah, that ain't happening.
Well, I know, because the IRS is a bunch of greedy pigs.
They already tax goods sold at stores and stuff. So
No. I mean, increase the taxes and increase you see, there's ways for us to cut federal spending. Here we are talking about the federal budget and all that. But yeah. Anyway, well, let's get back on topic. True pizza delivery horror stories animated. Shall we see what happens? You probably know what happens.
To an extent, I still remember.
Let's see.
That's why I see their animations for it.
Let's see what spoops.
Want to see if my imagination aligns with the imagination of the animator.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
I was out doing a delivery one late night. It was probably the longest drive I have ever taken for a pizza delivery. From the pizza place I worked at, it was a 20-minute drive, which isn't too crazy out where I live. Plus, they ordered 4 large pies, so I figured it was a party and I would get a much bigger tip. Navigating the dirt roads at night was always annoying, though. I pulled up to the given address. It was some old, sketchy-looking building, literally in the middle of a forest clearing. There were no cars parked anywhere, or any lights on. I put my car in park and called my boss. I asked him to reread the address at least 3 times to make sure I typed it in right, but that checked out. I could tell he was in a really bitchy mood, and he told me to at least knock on the door and check it out. He would normally get mad if we took back 1 pie, but I was afraid of what he would do if I brought back 4. I was insanely unnerved, but got out anyway and forced myself to the front door of the building. There was no doorbell, so I just knocked really hard.
Never hear anybody around here call them pies.
I heard nothing and didn't really expect to hear anything. I was extremely disappointed.
Probably New York.
Not because nobody answered
like
the door.
upstate New York or something.
Because I was
realizing pizza
that
pie. Get
it
you
was
a
all a
pizza
waste
pie.
of time and gas. I knocked one more time out of desperation.
This makes me think, what a splendid pie! Pizza, pizza pie.
I hear some kind of rustling noises from inside of the building. I knocked again and yelled that I was the pizza guy. There was silence now. I felt a bit more uncomfortable now than before. But before I could turn around, I noticed something at the window. There was someone looking through the window. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. All I noticed were their eyes. Their eyes were open wider than I knew possible, staring intently at me. I was disturbed enough by this and dropped the pizzas and ran back to my car. The shitty thing wouldn't start until turning the key for the 3rd time. I drove off the grass and back onto the dirt road, but I felt the car rocking about, shaking and bumping. Something wasn't right. I didn't make it far from the building before I started hearing a sharp scraping sound coming from outside. There was so much resistance that I couldn't even drive. The car came to a stop.
What's your emergency brake off, bro?
I got out of the car to check what the hell was wrong. A chill ran up my spine as I began to feel like my heart was constantly skipping beats. My tires had been slashed and had completely fallen off the rim. Not just the front though. All 4 tires were slashed. I realized somebody did this when I was knocking on the door to that building. Instead of running, I got back in the car and locked the doors. I was so close to that building, I could practically see it from where I was, if it weren't for the trees blocking the view. I dialed 911 and explained everything to the operator. She told me the cops would be over as soon as possible and that I need to stay hidden. I asked her if it was advisable to stay in the car or run, and she told me it would be best to stay in the car with the door locked. She asked me to stay on the line with her until the cops arrived. My whole body was shaking. In all directions, there was nothing but dark, seemingly endless forest. I knew it would take forever for the cops to get there. I was not comfortable with sitting in that car so close to whoever did this. The next part, though, is what utterly destroyed me. It still shakes me to this day, and I hope nobody ever has to experience this kind of fear. As I was scanning all the windows, making sure nobody was outside, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was the same person I saw at that window. Eyes open wider than ever. I could see now that it was a woman, and I could ever so slightly see a smile begin to spread across her face. I opened my door and full-on sprinted inside the woods, not caring how much noise I made. I ran until I was out of breath, which didn't take long, and I hid behind a giant log on the ground. I tried to cover my loud breathing with my hand as I waited and waited for what felt like hours, until I finally heard sirens in the distance. I gathered up all the stamina I had left to run all the way back in the direction of the dirt road. Eventually, the glowing red and blue lights came into view, and I had never felt better in my life. They were parked in front of my car, investigating with flashlights.
That's behind.
I came out yelling at them like a lunatic to help me. I fell to the floor and started to gag, almost throwing up from running so much. They picked me up and began to question me, to which I explained everything to the best of my ability. One of the 2 cars drove over to the building, and the 2 officers began to search the building. They came back with nothing except for a couple of spiky objects. These objects were exactly the same as the ones used to slash my tires. The cops guessed that it was some kind of sick, demented couple, being that I saw the woman, but unfortunately they were never found, and that still kills me to this day. I obviously quit my job right after that and started working at a local grocery store. I know that I'll never forget seeing that woman at the back of my car.
From my experience, working at a local grocery store is more terrifying than that. Hey there!
Hi there!
Fella.
How are you? Oh, God.
Can you sell me some bread?
Like
Some
you got
pizzas, maybe?
You got any of them cheesy poops? I want me some cheesy poops. My husband won't stop bugging me because I didn't bring him the right cheesy poops. So, yeah. I've... The scariest moment I've ever had working at one of the scariest moments. I'm not sure if it's the scariest. But there was I was working at a Hardee's, and this was one out on the edge of town, and we were there, and it was me and Darlene, who was our assistant manager, and Jessica, who was our lead manager. Now Darlene's a sweetheart, but she had one problem: terrible taste in men, and she came into work crying because her boyfriend said he was going to kill her and all this and all that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What happened? And she's like, I told him I didn't want to be around, didn't want to be with him anymore. And he threatened me. He threatened to kill me. And I'm just like, did you call the cops? And she's just like, no, I figured he'd calm down after a little while. And I'm like, that's nothing to mess around about. What if you go home and he's sitting there waiting for you, just ready to shoot you or kill you and all that? Turns out she didn't have to wait to go home.
He came to the store.
He didn't just come to the store. He pulled up in his truck out in the grass that was in front of... Because here's how it was. The store was right here in the middle. Then there was two lanes in. There was one lane in and a horseshoe, pretty much a horseshoe entryway, front and back. He pulls up to the front of the Hardee's, where the in between the in and the out, there's this grass mound that's there in between that's there where the sign's hanging. He pulls up in the grass and shines his lights like high beams all in there, and it's just me, Jessica, and Darlene. To which Jessica then reaches over and calls the cops and everything, and then he doesn't get out of the truck. He goes back and he drives through, and he drives around to where the window is, and I look out the window and everything, and he's just like I could see him leering in, just like trying to spot me or Darlene and Jessica. Anyway, he pulls up to the door and he gets out. He gets out for just a little bit. And then Darlene yells out, "Get out of here, Brad! I called the cops!" To which he just goes. He gets back in his truck, closes the door, just peels out. Cops arrive, and we usually had a cop waiting for us there because of whenever we took the bank bag out at night. One of our managers almost got robbed one night.
Yeah,
and they didn't want that to happen again, so. They told the cops, just send a unit over every night to make sure that nothing bad happens. Anyway, 2 cop cars show up that night, and effectively they make sure Darlene's okay and everything. They get a statement from her, and to my knowledge, Brad left her, and she hasn't seen him since. So,
no offense to her, but Darlene just sounds like one of those names, one of those ladies that ends up in a relationship like that. So just imagine the douchebag, and I'm like, God damn it, Darlene, open the door.
Pretty much. That's what I Well, pretty much that's Darlene in a nutshell. She's just such bad taste in men. She's thinking to herself like, "Oh, I can help him out. I can save him." Can't save somebody who doesn't want to be saved.
Yep.
That's just how it is.
My only creepy work story was from my most recent job at the grocery store, where basically we're at night stock, and we're the only people in the store once the store closes at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I would do aisle 7 and aisle 1 through 4. Aisle 7 is the cereal aisle, and then 1 through 4 is like the fruit snacks and the cookies and shit like that.
Yeah, like lunch snacks and everything.
And when you go over to aisle 1, you're the farthest away from anybody else that's working that night that you're going to be, because you got 3 more aisles in between at least you and the next person. But usually they've moved on to like aisle 9 by that point, and they're out of 5. And so like you're very alone over there on that one side of the store by yourself. It's really far away from the speakers that play the music, and it's very quiet and eerie over there. And so the only thing I have going for me is like my phone in my pocket playing my music on it, and it's just kind of, I occasionally would get like these like, somebody's watching me like vibes. And then we all have talked about how occasionally at night we'll be working in an aisle and we'll see somebody walking up the aisle towards us, while we're putting something on the shelf. We'll be like, oh, they're coming to tell us something or coming to get us for a break or something like that. Then we'll look up, nobody's fucking there. We're just like, okay.
Okay.
But this one night while I was doing aisle 1, I was putting some gushers on the bottom shelf, and it's like over in the corner, like basically like here's where the gushers are, and this little thing comes out and turns into like the fridge section that wraps around the corner of the store. So I'm like in that little corner putting some gushers up, and then I turn around and there's a fucking balloon floating by at like this level. I'm just like, oh, fuck no.
Like all of a sudden you're just going to hear, Hi there, Nicholas. How are you? Would you like to have some popcorn? Pop, pop, pop.
Hell no.
How about some heavy metal? Would you like to listen to some heavy metal?
I've got
some Metallica.
Yeah, I told my manager, I was like, dude, you better be glad that wasn't a white balloon that had a food, like the food store logo on it, because otherwise, if it was a red balloon, you probably would have seen me just like sprint by you in aisle 5 being like, I fucking quit! I fucking quit! And then just on out the store and never came back.
Where's he going?
I'd be like, all right.
Instead
I was like, that's fucking weird as hell. And so my other manager, Keith, was working that night. And Keith and me had this joke because he watches shit like this on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he says occasionally he gets creeped out. And so we have this joke where we'll be like, did you hear that? Like, while working. And be like, yeah, I heard that. And there's some shit like that.
Like,
so he was over in the drink aisle. So I just snuck as quietly as I could with the balloon over to the aisle right before that, which is the snack aisle. And I
God.
Poof, and popped it over the shelf and went back to my aisle real quick.
You dick. You dick. If you'd have done that to me, I'd have went up behind you with the balloon. I walked up behind you as slow as possible, got a stick pin, just pop, popped it right behind you, and just see you go like, what the fuck?
Well, when we went to, he worked so quick and so fast and stuff that I guess he didn't actually stop or anything because of it, and it was still there when I walked back and we were going to lunch, and I was like, where'd that balloon come from, Keith? And he's just like, oh no, it's fucking weird, ain't it? And I was like, yeah, a little bit. I don't know, it's funny. Man, it did freak me out when I turned around and I just saw that balloon. I just stopped for a minute and I watched it, and it's just like, I'm just like, fuck no. Like, that's not cool, bro.
And you're just like, I expect you would be like seeing that balloon float by. As soon as it goes by and it leaves your line of sight, you'd be like, Keith! And he'd just be like, sorry, bro. Just wanted to scare you a bit.
Nah.
It's like, it wasn't me, bro. I never said it was. Shit. But yeah. Every now and again, like, me and my friends, we talk about, like, going to, like, a haunted place and, like, getting a camera with night vision on it and just, like, sitting there and, like, listening for stuff and everything.
That's how horror movies start.
I know. And, like, it would be just us sitting there. It's always
white people going to places they shouldn't be going to.
Hey, we're boundary pushers, all right? Give Steve Irwin fucking credit. Because, actually, I think it was Chris Rock who said it. He's like, you see that crocodile hunter dude? He dead. But guess what? Or no, it was Cat Williams. It's Cat Williams who said it. He's like, white people are crazy, But guess what? That's how we know about shit. That's how we know about shit. That's how we know a difference between a Bengal tiger and a fucking house cat.
Yeah.
Because brothers would roll up in a truck and just be like, oh, bro, is that a tiger or a Newfoundland pit bull? Go, man, go, get out of here. Let's get out of here. Yeah, and he's like, nah, the man was crazy and he died for what he loved. But I'll be honest, shouldn't have been fucking around with that stingray. It's like, yeah, effectively. If I'm fucking around with a stingray, you know what I'm wearing? Body armor. I'm wearing like a Kevlar vest. Like, I'll go underwater with a Kevlar vest on and just be like, Jesus God.
Dude, people who go in the ocean do not put enough protective gear on from what I've seen.
Oh, God.
Like, I would have protective gear of some kind on. I'd be putting shit on it. People would be like, what are you doing? Be like, it's the goddamn ocean, man.
It's the ocean.
It's the fucking ocean.
Dude.
I want to go in and come back out with all of my limbs still attached. Thank you very much.
Effectively,
or at all. I would like to come back out at all.
Have you seen
People be like, oh, the chances of something happening. So there's bullshit. Bullshit. 90% of the things in the ocean are fucking horrifying.
Have you seen heard Donald Cerrone? You heard of Donald Cerrone, right? Cowboy Cerrone, the MMA fighter?
I don't think so.
Well, anyway, he's an MMA fighter, but in his spare time, he is pretty much an everyman. He does literally everything. He goes rock climbing. He goes like wakeboarding. He wrestles cattle. He rides horses. He just does all sorts of like fun, like weird stuff too. Like he is a verified like ultra deep sea diver. And one thing that happened to him, he got lost in an underwater cave.
Yeah, fuck that. I wouldn't even go in an
with a
underwater
limited
cave.
Oxygen supply. Well, here's the thing. He went down there because he'd heard about this glowing algae that he wanted to see. And he always wanted to see it, and he went down there with what he thought was an experienced diver. But turns out the guy had been on one too many dives and actually got really, really scared really easily. And whenever you panic in a cave, the very number one thing he says, like, when you're in the cave, don't panic and don't kick your feet too heavy. Because you do that, you're going to throw up the silt, and it's going to make vision an absolute fucking nightmare. And they had a lifeline going in. They had one line going in. Mm-hmm. And that was their lifeline to get out. That took them out the route that they came in. They had their headlamps on and all that. But anyway, the guy panics and starts kicking and like throws up silt everywhere.
Yeah.
And Cowboy, was like trying to hold on to him, like calm down. And then the guy wouldn't calm down. And the rule is, if you lose your lifeline, find a wall and crawl. Mm. Find a wall and crawl in the direction you think is right. Well, anyway, he loses track of his buddy completely. The guy he dove down there with, gone. Couldn't find him anywhere. Anyway, Cowboy is following this wall, and he hits a dead end.
Shit.
And he's like, fuck, what am I going to do? And he starts panicking a little bit. And then he starts thinking to himself, it's like, I am not going to fucking die here. I'm going to get married. I'm not going to die here. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have a bunch of kids. I'm going to get the fuck out of here. And he starts like pawing around the wall again and crawls down the other direction. And there's a fork. And he's just like, fuck. And he goes around both sides, all around both sides of the fork to see if he can see the rope, the lifeline anywhere. Mm. It's nowhere to be found. So something's happened to the lifeline. Anyway, Cowboy walks, just like floating around, swimming around, and he finds this one crack in the wall, and he's just like, wait a second. Cracks usually lead out. Cracks like this usually lead outward. Because it was a crack that instead of, bridging inward into the cave, instead it was bridging outward from the cave. So he was just like, I'm going to follow this. He then latches onto it, and he paws his way up, paws his way out, and he went down there with like a 2 hours worth of air, but he'd spent about an hour and a half trying to find his way out.
Yeah.
But he finds this crack, and he follows it, and he just keeps crawling, and then he sees light. He then swims for the light, surfaces, exhales, expends all of the tank air from his lungs, gets up to the surface, and sees the guy that he dove with. And they swim to each other, and they meet up in the water, and the guy's like, you're never diving with me again, are you? And Cowboy goes, fuck no, man. Never again. Never again, man.
He's
I'm
like,
sorry.
you're a fucking dumbass.
He's like, you fucking left me in there. And he's just like, I just followed the rules, man. He's like, I understand, but you fucking left me in there. And you didn't even, like, and you panicked. What's the number one rule? Don't panic. Exactly. And you're supposed to be experienced to know this, but yet you did it anyway. And it's just a whole thing, dude, that when I heard it, it's the only segment on the Joe Rogan podcast where Joe Rogan doesn't, like, chime in and try and add in his 2 cents. Like, he was, like, fully invested. He was just like, fuck. Like he was, like, very quiet during it. That's the quietest I've ever heard Joe Rogan on his podcast. But
he's very quiet on one I heard recently, too, with a guy explaining, like, essentially he was a young delinquent and had stolen a car and got arrested, and while he was in jail, like, he read a paper about, like, this random murder of this girl in this place, and so for some stupid reason he decided to try to get himself out of what he had, because he's like, I have information on that murder, and essentially ended up getting himself framed for that murder and was in prison for, like, it was a huge chunk of his life and shit, and, like, his life was awful. My buddy was showing it to me because he's like, if you ever think your life sucks, listen to this guy talk about what happened to him, because his life fucking sucks.
yeah.
But Joe was, like, basically, just listening to him intently the whole time and letting him tell his story.
Well, I would too. I mean, I'd sit there and I'd just be, and, like, whenever he paused for emote, whenever, like, if he ever paused to, like, let people say something or, like, give 2 cents on something, because just like if he said, and they threw me in jail, and if he paused, like, he's like, they just threw me in jail, man, and, like, he didn't say anything after that, I'd be like, oh, that's fucked up, dude. I'm so sorry about that.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I'd say. I wouldn't
That's all
try
I can
and
say,
interject
really.
myself into the story.
Yeah.
I would let them tell their story. I used to be terrible for that. I used to be terrible at not letting people finish their fucking stories. And now I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it, but I still wanna try. I still wanna try and get better at that.
Yeah.
But all right, that was a good story anyway. The true pizza delivery horror story, animated. So if you all enjoyed that, let us know in the comments down below. And also, if you want to see more from us, if you want to see more from Llama Arts or more from Mr. Nightmare, feel free to check out the original video. Links are in the description as always down below. And well, until next time, signing off. I'm Nate,
I'm Nick.
and we will see you later, everyone.